Hi, my name is Chris Morris and I'm going to talk to you about the Graded Care Profile 2. And the Graded Care Profile 2 is an assessment tool developed by the NSPCC to help professionals working with families to assess the quality of care being delivered within that home where neglect is suspected. Now, before we move on to actually look at the tool itself, I'm going to take a moment to talk to you about some of the difficulties that professionals experience when assessing neglect. Now, one of the things that comes up quite often in the context of neglect is this term, good enough. It's still often used by professionals when talking about neglect and the quality of care being provided. It's still often used by professionals in terms of the quality of the cleanliness of the home. It is good enough. Now, one of the challenges when assessing neglect is, what does that term mean? Actually, how can we quantify good enough? We have documents such as our own thresholds documents which we can compare to, but actually in the context of working with families, talking to other professionals, we need to get better at actually quantifying and having a shared language as to what is good enough, and more importantly, what isn't good enough. One of the other challenges when assessing neglect is the fact that its very nature, it is complex and intergenerational. A parent's own childhood experiences will play a huge factor in how they parent their own children. We often see this in things such as parents saying, well, what do you mean I'm neglecting my child? They don't know how lucky they are. When I was their age, I had X or didn't have X. Now, we sometimes can assume that this is actually parents almost being difficult or not fully understanding what it is that we're concerned about. And that's exactly the point. It is intergenerational. A parent's own experiences will factor how they parent. They may not have been shown some of the reasons why we're concerned. And by using umbrella terms such as neglect, we are sometimes not actually showing the parents exactly what it is in their parenting that is leading us to fear that they are neglecting their child. Research also shows that professionals report differences of opinions amongst themselves with regards to what constitutes neglect. Now, these professionals may all be working with the same family, and if they can't agree amongst themselves about whether the thresholds are being met, or where the quality of care is, or where the concerns are, then actually my question is, are we certain that the families themselves are actually crystal clear as to what it is professionals are concerned about? Again, it's highlighting this need for shared language and common understanding. Within the definition of neglect, emotional care is there. It talks about actually failure to provide adequate emotional care. This can constitute actually love, and it can be the thing that most professionals worry themselves about with regards to when working with families. That actually the relationship between parent and child is of a significant concern. However, how do we quantify that? How do we actually show our concerns when we think that actually what we're concerned about isn't physical, we can't touch it, it's emotional care? That can make assessing neglect in emotional care extremely difficult. Now, finally, as well as all of the above, we also have what is known as lag. Now, lag is the term used to describe the delay between neglect starting and actually the effects becoming evidence. Now, this could be because of a child's age, and actually there could be a lag between the child being neglected and them hitting a certain developmental milestone where we can start to see the concerns being attributed. But it also could be because there's other, possibly some resources that they're pulling upon. So we sometimes might see the case of a child being severely neglected at home, but yet somehow flourishing at school. We might see a child who's being neglected at home, and the delay may actually be before they start to realise that this is not good enough care. It may be all that child has known. Now, one of the major issues when assessing neglect with lag is, from a social care point of view, when thresholds are being met, lag can make it hard to take cases to court. So now that we've talked about why assessing neglect is difficult, hopefully you'll begin to understand why there is a clear need for an assessment tool that multiple professionals can use when assessing neglect. It gives us a shared language and gives us a common understanding of what is good enough, for want of a better term. Now, Graded Care Profile 2 is actually the second version of what was known as the Graded Care Profile. I'm going to take a moment to talk to you about the Graded Care Profile and how it came about. A Graded Care Profile was formed by a local GP in Luton in the late 1990s, Dr. Srivastava. Dr. Srivastava would see that actually he had multiple families coming into his appointment, into his clinic, and he would then see, actually, I've got concerns around neglect within these families. But what Dr. Srivastava found was exactly what we just talked about. He found it hard to assess exactly what it was that he was seeing in his surgery. Now, Dr. Srivastava himself says that he can assess the level of break or the severity of break of a fractured arm on a grade of 1 to 5, but he couldn't assess the severity of neglect that he was seeing within these clinics. As a result of that, he decided to do something about it. He decided to see whether or not he could grade the level of care that parents provide to their children, and he created the graded care profile. It was a tool used for graded 1 to 5 in various different aspects of parenting and started to unpack the level of parenting. Now, this tool was done widely used across the UK. However, it wasn't trademarked and it started to be changed by different local authorities. The evidence was then not there because actually different local authorities used it in different ways and there was no evidence backing it. The NSPCC, as part of their research into neglect, started looking into different tools being used to assess the quality of care. That's when they discovered Dr. Srivastava's graded care profile tool. Now, NSPCC decided to do the first UK-based research into this tool, and what they found was the evidence that you see on this slide now. They found that it was a more objective and evidence-based tool. By actually having the tool itself and a grade of care where you compare the level of what you've seen in your observations against the grades in front of you, it forced the parent and the professional working with the family to become more objective about the level of care. Now, one of the crucial aspects, and I cannot stress this enough, is the graded care profile also identifies strengths as well as weaknesses within parenting. This is really important because actually we want to see what is it that parents doing really well already, because in this world where we need to identify and tailor our resources, why would we put resources in place when actually the parents are doing something really well? I also have found, and research has also suggested, that it shows that parents engage much better if you can actually show them that you recognise what they're doing well, and parents must be much more likely to listen to you about the concerns that you have. Now, as we discussed, neglect is complex and it can be quite a broad definition, and therefore the graded care profile unpacked parenting into different sections and made it helpful to identify exactly what it was that we were concerned about. This both helped the professional and also the parent in together forming a plan and moving things forward. Now, it promotes a child-centred approach. The graded care profile does not take into account other parental factors. Now, we all know that sometimes we can go into a home and we can do a visit and we can leave that visit thinking, I think I've just spent an hour talking about the parents' needs and I haven't managed to focus on the child centre in the middle of this. Now, the important thing about the graded care profile is that it doesn't take into account that, it just calls the level of care being delivered to that child. It's assessing the quality of care being delivered. We assess and we analyse afterwards, but we score based on what we've observed. Now, it is also a participative process. Research suggests that parents engage very well with the graded care profile. It is clear for parents to see exactly what it is that you are concerned about, and also by having the grades in front of them, they can see what it is that we want them to be doing. Sometimes parents may report that actually once they hear the term neglect, they don't quite understand exactly what it is that we're concerned about, and sometimes some parents report that it's almost like a yellow brick road that they think they can never go down to get to where a social worker, a school, a health visitor wants them to be, and therefore we find disengagement, or we sometimes find parents burying their head in the sand and not engaging in the process. This is a very clear tool which shows parents not only why we'd be concerned, but also when we'd not be concerned, and helps parents to move participatively in that process towards areas where we're not concerned, grades 1, 2 and 3. So the NSPCC looked at this research into graded care profile and worked with Dr. Srivastava to create a graded care profile 2. It built on all the strengths of the original model, but it also added extras to make it into the modern world. Now, you can see that actually the sub-areas and the areas in the graded care profile cover things such as development, physical, safety and emotional. Now, by doing that, it helps us to unpack parenting, as we said in the previous slide, but it also has things such as online safety in graded care profile 2, which factors into actually adequate supervision, are parents fully aware of what their child's doing online. Really important in the modern world that we have a way of assessing that. One of the other changes that NSPCC put in was simply put in a colour code traffic light system, with 1s being bright green and 5s being reds. This also helps the participative process with parents because actually even those with literacy concerns can follow exactly where we need to be. Greens, we're very happy. Ambers, we're a bit concerned. Moving to reds, where we're very concerned, possible child protection matters. This shows that actually parents can clearly see what area of the parenting that we're concerned about and exactly what grade we've given them. Now, important thing to recognise about the Graded Care Profile 2, it is a snapshot assessment. Now that means that actually we base our assessment on what we've seen within the window of doing the assessment. So, ideally, and recommendation is you would do this over 4 visits within a small window, 2 to 4 weeks' time. Now, by doing that, we base all of our observations on this moment in time within the window of the assessment. We don't factor in things such as parcel. The neighbour once told me that they played out in a summer dress in the middle of winter. Useful information, but we can't score a graded care profile based on that. We can only base it on what we observe. And the really important thing about using the graded care profile is it can be used to give us a baseline measurement of the quality of care being delivered. Now the slide shows us the graded care profile can be done over 2 points in time. The first one was completed in June, and it showed that there were some 4s and there were some 5s on this scale. Now, by doing that and identifying exactly which areas that we're concerned about, that will help us to formulate a plan with the parents to try and address those 4s and 5s. Now clearly in this example, the plan has been put in place and 6 months later in December, another graded care profile has been completed. Now you'll see from the slide that actually the graded care profile shows that those 4s and those 5s have all moved up to 3s, which means that our concerns have moved from never met to them being met. So actually we're concerned less about the quality of care being delivered. Our plan appears to be working. Now that's really positive to be able to show parents the journey that they've changed, that they've travelled, but also it's evidence to show the impact that we've made. An interesting side point with that slide, you may notice that actually those 2s and 3s didn't move. And taking us back, why would they? Actually, we're putting our areas of support into those areas we're concerned about, those 4s and 5s. Why would we waste resources and put plans in place on things that the parents are already doing well? So again, it shows parents that we're listening to what they're doing well, and we can show parents exactly what we're concerned about, and hopefully we can start to make a change. If that assessment in December, or even after 3 months, showed no change, then we also have evidence to show that actually our plan is not working, and we can start to have questions about whether or not the threshold has been met. Is this willful neglect? Is there capacity issues? We have the evidence now to have these conversations with other professionals. So, finally, who can use this tool? Now on the slide you'll see a list of different practitioners from school family support workers, homeschool liaisons, social workers, education welfare officers, health visitors, but actually that's just a guideline. Ultimately, anyone working with children, young people and families can be trained to use this tool. The key thing is you have to complete the GCP2 training to become a licensee. Now, the NSPCC, in their research into the Graded Care Profile 2, tested multiple professionals who had the same training going into the same home. They didn't share results and they came back and did their own Graded Care Profile 2s. They tested this and showed that actually the measure of difference was marginal between them. And therefore, the impact is it's the tool, not the practitioner, that actually can be evidence tested here. So the tool, not the practitioner. Now the important factor there is means that the tool can travel with the family. Let's go on a journey where we say a health visitor has some concerns and does a graded care profile too. They get their baseline assessment, they start to put a plan in place as to what support needs to be put in place. They do that support, they do a graded care profile after 3 months and nothing has changed. These are still significant concerns. They may then send this into the national assessment team and a social worker may then do an assessment and it may go to ICPC, Initial Child Protection Conference. At that point, they may want to do another graded care profile too, and they can compare it to the one that was done by the health visitor. Now also then, that might go into longer term family support and be done again at review child protection conferences and so on and so on. So we actually have an evidence here to say that from the initial GCP being completed by the health visitor, we still have the same concerns despite the numerous plans being put in place. Going back to our point about why assessing neglect is difficult, this goes a long way to start to cut some of those issues in place. It can also work both ways. We can also evidence why we think there are strengths in this family. Regardless of what profession you come from, you can complete the Graded Care Profile 2 training if you're assessing the quality of care being provided is of interest to you. So look on the details on the LSEB website or with your local authority as to how you can book on to training near you.